Troy and I started preschool around the age of 3, I believe. It was probably around the time we were 4 years old that I told an even bigger lie than the golf ball trick. After Mum had dropped us off at preschool, we were walking up the front stairs to enter the building, and I heard one of the teachers say, "Where did this cake come from?" And the assistant teacher reply, "I don't know." My 4-year-old brain understood that cake was up for grabs, and it didn't want to miss out because of any uncertainty about its origin. So I turned to my twin brother and said, "Let's tell them that it's our birthday." Troy looked horrified and said, "They'll ask us what we got as presents." To which I quickly responded, "Tell them what we got for Christmas." We entered the building and I confidently announced, "It's our birthday today." Sure enough, at morning tea recess they gave us a little party. The whole class sang happy birthday to us, and we got to blow out the candles and eat a piece of cake. However, while they were singing happy birthday, I nearly burst into tears. I felt so ashamed and self-conscious about this big lie. I was sick to my stomach with shame and fear, and my insides were squirming uncontrollably. When my mother came to pick us up, the teachers asked Angela, "Why didn't you tell us that it was the twins' birthday?" To which my mother responded, "Because it's not their birthday." Later in the car, she scolded me so much. "How could you say that? Why did you do that? What were you thinking? How could you do that to me?" I feel so embarrassed. The answer was simple. There was cake, and I wanted a piece of it. If you look at it one way, being able to quickly formulate and implement a strategy was probably a sign of intelligence. But if I hadn't felt any shame, then that might have been a sign of sociopathy. I think I was just a kid, figuring out what was acceptable and unacceptable behavior. I was certainly much more reluctant to tell big fibs after this excruciating experience. Another somewhat traumatic event I remember from preschool was when the teacher noticed that although I was good at coloring and drawing, I never made any cutouts with scissors. She came to me one day, scissors in hand, and insisted that I come and cut something out. However, what she didn't know was that my mother had sternly forbidden me from ever even touching scissors. Consequently, I was terrified, and I ran over to the side of the room, pulled a cupboard out from the wall, and hid behind it in fear, squatting on the ground. I eventually noticed how extreme my reaction had been, and began to question myself on this matter. Later that day, when I was alone at home, I went straight to my mother's sewing box and took out her large sewing scissors. I examined them to try to see just what was so scary about them, and seeing nothing too terrifying, I went back to my bedroom and duly started taking snips out of my bedspread. When my mother came into the room, she yelled at me, and I explained that the teacher had scolded me for not doing cutouts. The next day, my mother scolded the preschool teacher as well. My mother was of the opinion that children should be disciplined if they were truly naughty. She was a believer in the spare the rod, spoil the child philosophy, as it were. When asking for something in the Hanson household, you always said please, and when you received it, you always said thank you. If you hurt someone's feelings or made a mistake, you said sorry, and if you made a mess, you helped to clean it up. We were taught to brush our teeth every morning and evening, and to always wash our hands after going to the bathroom. We had a bath every night as toddlers, and later, we took hot showers. We did not talk with our mouths full. These standards were strictly enforced. We were clean and well-mannered, but we were allowed to run around barefoot in the backyard or ride our bikes barefoot if it was just a short distance. Sometimes we would ride our bikes around for hours and our mother didn't mind. That's how safe it was in the area where we lived. So my upbringing was a balance of discipline and freedom based on trust. With regard to being disciplined, there was usually a system of warnings. You would be warned, but if you continued doing whatever it was that was deemed unacceptable, then there would be consequences. In my memory, it always seemed to be me who got smacked. This is probably fair enough, because I was something of a ringleader, and usually talked back. Every now and then, if I had been particularly recalcitrant, my mother would say to my father, "Mel, discipline your son." My father would usually send me to my room. I suspect that because of his own experiences of being beaten by his father, he really did not want to hit his son. Therefore, having been egged on and nagged by my mother to do so, he would take a few minutes to work up the willingness and then come up to my bedroom. This worked to my advantage, because I would quickly put on every pair of underwear that I had, then pull up my shorts or trousers to conceal the fact. When my father took off his belt and whipped me on my bottom through my clothing, I pretended to scream and cry out. When he left the room and my brothers came in to check on me, I would already be laughing. This didn't happen very often, and my father never cottoned on to the fact that although there was crying, there were no actual tears. When we were 5 years old, my twin brother Troy and I started school half a year earlier than usual. The headmistress needed to increase student numbers in order to avoid losing a teacher, so she asked my mother if we could help them out with this. The school bus would pick us up right in front of our house. It served both the local primary school and high school, as well as the Catholic private school, so we were on the same bus as our older siblings. As the smallest kids on the crowded bus, the driver made us sit in an area directly adjoining his seat. We had to sit cross-legged and hold on to an iron bar. I remember that Mr. Hamilton, the bus driver, had strong body odor and that my hands had a sour smell after holding the old iron bar. If we talked or laughed too much, Mr. Hamilton would pinch us. Not surprisingly, I didn't like him. I really loved my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. McCormack. She had a way of talking to the children as though they were her friends. I distinctly remember her describing to our class of 5- and 6-year-olds her honeymoon weekend away with her husband. Nothing too graphic, but she did say that she loved the feel of her husband's beard when he kissed her. I also remember that she had been impressed by the toast at their hotel because it was crunchy on the outside yet warm and soft on the inside and melted in her mouth. I think it was the joy, love, and appreciation she expressed in her description that made such a deep impression on my mind. However, after she hit me on the hand with a ruler one day, I fell out of love with her.
Why did she hit me?
When playing outside one day after it had rained, I found an earthworm wriggling on the concrete. As a 6-year-old boy, the obvious thing to do was to pick it up. A girl nearby, Lisa MacDonald, who was also my neighbor, looked aghast when she saw me do this, and so naturally I decided to throw it in her direction, at which she screeched and burst into tears. Mrs. McCormack came running over and demanded to know what had happened. Lisa dobbed on me, and Mrs. McCormack made me hold out my hand while she hit it with a ruler. I remember being very affronted. I felt that Lisa should have been the one to get smacked for being so stupid. It was only an earthworm after all. For the first 2 years, Troy and I sat together in class until the teachers felt that separation would be better for us. In grade 2, my teacher, Mrs. Pierce, who was also the headmistress of the school, was handing out books to the children sitting on the floor around her one day when a book fell and hit me. I admonished her, saying, "Hey, that book hit me in the head, miss." To which she responded, "Good, because you talk too much." Not surprisingly, I didn't like her much after that,